All right. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. This is Jamie Green with the Unmuted Destiny with Jamie Green. And I'm excited tonight to have my baby sister with me. We're going to be talking about a very special and sacred topic tonight that um, often occurs in the Black community, but is not often discussed. Yesterday, July 19th, began Black Maternal Mental Health Week. And I wanted to honor um, this week, one by honoring my sister Sylvia, who we honored yesterday through the Sister Circle luncheon. And then today, I'm further honoring our sisters by having my sister be with me tonight to talk about the experience of having a stillborn baby, the impact of it, and how it alters your life. It is something that, as I said, happens in our community, but we don't talk about it much. But during the Black Maternal Mental Health Week, I think it's a perfect time to have this conversation. Um, Black women, stillbirth, and silent grief is our theme for tonight. Black mothers are more than twice as likely as others to experience stillbirths, not because they're less worthy, but not because they don't care, but because systems have failed to hear their voices, honor their pain, and protect their pregnancies. This conversation tonight is not just about loss, it's about legacy, it's about advocacy and the healing that we are overdue. So join me tonight as we bring to voice the silence and truth of our statistics because our stories matters and so do our babies. So I also want to say that we revamped the Let's Talk Destiny podcast and renamed it Unmuted Destiny with Jamie Green. And this is actually our very first podcast under our new name. Yay! So join me in welcoming my baby sister, Kelly Green. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I did want to
All right.
piggyback a little bit off of what you said about stillbirths and how there are two things that I feel are really important to discuss tonight. And one is that there is a disproportionate amount of African American women who experience it compared to our white counterparts. Some of that, as we know, has to do with um, healthcare and those kinds of things. It also has to do, of course, there's been a decrease for the Caucasian culture. Their numbers have gone down, but have stayed high. This disparity is really the socioeconomic stuff, as well as having access, but also the systemic racism and stigmatism and all of these negative things that are so I wanted to talk about actually those three things, because after
Absolutely.
that I
It
wanted to
was
talk about
definitely,
in our culture perceived and dealt with. One of
well,
the
we're
things,
having
this other
some
thing that I
delay.
feel that when a woman has a stillbirth, people immediately as that, oh, you had a miscarriage. Can you hear me?
You keep going in and out.
I'm sorry. So a lot of times, like when a woman has a, people will say, "Oh, you had a miscarriage," and unfortunately, I had the displeasure of having a miscarriage, but I also and having a stillbirth. And I remember the nurse saying to me very specifically when I had the stillbirth, she says, "This is not a miscarriage." And she wanted to be very clear to me that there was a difference. And without going into a lot of the physical health part, the main thing is the age of the child. So anything prior to 20 weeks of pregnancy could be considered a miscarriage. Anything after that is considered a stillbirth. The part of the challenge is because when I um, had my son, they already at that point have bone structure, so it's not like you could just like when you sometimes women have miscarriages and they literally pass them like they would on their cycle, because it's they don't have a lot of substance yet, the child's body. However, with as I said, with a stillborn, they already have bone structure. So one of the things that the doctor shared with me was, you will have to give birth. It's not like you can just pass him. You're going to have to push him out like you go into labor. And that's exactly what I had to do. I had to have labor and I had to give birth. um, Unfortunately, giving birth and knowing at the time that you're giving the birth, which is also many times labeled as bringing life, you're realizing that you're not bringing life into the world, that this is actually, you're bringing a dead person into the world, because at that point he was already dead inside of me. Thus, that terminology of stillbirth means that the baby is not. I forget but he wasn't alive. It wasn't like I gave birth to a live baby and then he died. He died inside of me, and then I had to give birth to him. So it made that birth more intense because he wasn't pushing his way into the world like babies do. He was just, I had to do all the work, of course, with a little help from morphine to get him out.
Well,
When I talk
I
about
was
the
thinking,
stillbirth, and this,
can you hear
I'm
me?
sorry,
No,
I can hear you
because
now. The first time I
there's
did
a
it.
lag there. There's a lag there.
Okay.
Um, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions before we got into the um, the specifics of what your body went through. Um,
Okay.
did you like most little girls, or not most, a lot of little girls, when they're younger, they dream about becoming a mother. Did you have that dream, or were you one of those that said, I don't ever want kids?
Well, I was one of those that wanted one child, and I already had, so I was like one and done, um, in my mind. And you know my story. Um, it's like I didn't plan on having any more children, and then when my son, I had the stillbirth when my oldest son was 8, and then I had Christian when he was. I, I really didn't plan on having any more children. Um, I could only imagine. I do remember, Jamie, I did have a miscarriage where it was not a miscarriage that I was spontaneous, because they call them spontaneous abortions, what they call miscarriages, because you abort the pregnancy, you didn't plan to. It just spontaneously happened. However, I did have to have one because the baby was in my tube uh, prior to having my oldest son. Oh no, after my older son. So no, it was before. I'll get it right in a minute. when you after 60, the time is elapsed. But it was before. And I just remember at that point I was thinking, I don't know if I wanted any kids because I wasn't sure, what that was going to be like. I did have female problems like endometriosis, and my chances for getting pregnant, they said, were slim. So I kind of was okay. And when I was blessed with Kevin, I was like, okay, that's good enough for me. So I was good. And
So
then
when you this
God,
this time
God
with
really
the baby that you lost, um, which something else I studied, I found out when I was studying for this. When you have a stillborn baby, it is good for you to name the baby so that you don't just keep referring to it as the baby I lost or the whatever. So, what was your baby's name?
my baby was named for his father. His name was Latan, and his name was Latan Jr. And as a matter of fact, my husband he was my husband, who is also now deceased, but he carried the picture because after Latan was born, well, there were two things that happened. Like, your mother was very adamant that we were going to have a funeral for him, that they were not at the hospital because she believed that they were going to do all kind of tests and stuff on him. She was like, they're not doing it to my taking him, and we're having a funeral. And we did. Mr. Billy Handy came and got him, and he had a funeral. But they let you take pictures. They let you hold them, and they let you take pictures, and they carried the picture for the longest. Um, that was We definitely named him because, again, this is not a miscarriage. It's not going to feel like a miscarriage where, oh, I just accidentally lost a baby. No, this is where you're going to go through labor and you're going to push a baby out. So it was different.
Wow. So let me ask you this question. When they informed you that your baby was dead inside of you, do you remember your initial response to that news?
This is nothing that you would ever forget. And the interesting part is, and I think I've shared before, I probably would have not very, very hard. But I wouldn't have done as well without the doctor that I had. Dr. Kevin Carney was my doctor. And I thought he had the best bedside manner of any person I knew. And what I remember very specifically is got a tear in my bag on a Friday. And I started leaking fluid to the hospital, and they told me that they thought it was kind of infection for me to just go home and see my doctor on Monday. By Saturday night, I was in labor, and my mom took me to the hospital because my husband was actually away in Florida at the time, and I was at my mother's house for some reason. And so I went they took me in the house they put me in the hospital with the hope that putting me on bed rest, that the tear, because it wasn't a big tear, it was just small, would mend. And when it would mend, then they would, then we could keep the baby a couple more weeks, and then they were going to have me go ahead and try to go into labor. But unfortunately, I and so they would come in and they would check the baby's heartbeat like periodically, like every 4 hours or so. And I remember the day that the nurse came in and we didn't hear anything. And she kept reaching around and she didn't hear anything. And she said, I'll be back. So when she came back, she says, we need to take you down for a sonogram. They took me down for a sonogram. At that point, I knew something was not right. But when I saw the sonogram, I saw my son just laying there, like not moving or anything. And I said to the nurse, "What's wrong with my baby?" And because of protocol, which I learned later, she could not tell me what she knew to be true. She said, "We're going to take you back to your room." And she said, "Your doctor's going to come and talk to you." And I went back to the room, and, again, in my heart, I knew something wasn't right. And Dr. Carney, who, again, I say is one of the best OBGYNs that I've ever encountered, and he calls everybody Tiger. That's his little bedside manner. And he said, "Tiger," he said, "I got some bad news for you." And I looked at it. The baby didn't make it. He said, "But the news is you're going to have to give birth to him anyway." He said, "I can't go take him or anything." He said, "You're going to have to push him out."
Wow.
So, by the time he came, I kind of had the idea. I kind of figured. I mean, I saw him not moving and it was some time we were in the sonogram room. And on top of not being able to find the heartbeat prior. So I definitely remember that moment like it just happened. I can remember every detail of the rock the when they take the cart, the chair, the bed, whatever, and they're pushing me down the hall. I remember the push to the sonogram room. I remember the push back. I remember just laying in my bed waiting for the doctor to come to tell me what I already knew. And I was just very concerned about what happened. I definitely will, Mutima, say something to that myth, because the myth not only comes from other people saying that, you say it to yourself, and it becomes, there were a lot of things at the time that were going on. And quite honestly, it's funny that Jamie asked me about wanting more kids, because I didn't want any more children. And when I had found out I was pregnant, my initial thing was, I don't want no more kids. So when I had the stillbirth, a part of me said, "See, you spoke that into existence, because you didn't want." And at first I didn't know, and then there was the guilt also, where I didn't know I was pregnant. So I remember, the first couple months, like, something's not right, but the pregnancy tests were negative. I remember in the third month, an older lady said something, "You're pregnant." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And she said, and I said it with confidence because I had had these pregnancy tests. So I know a pregnant, something about a pig, some old saying she used. And she said, "When I see one," she said, "and you're pregnant." So I let it go, because I'm like, okay, I don't care what she say. In my fourth month, I went for a job interview. And I'm talking to the CEO, and she's talking about hiring me. We get on the elevator, and she says, "Can I ask you something?" And I said, "Sure." She said, "Are you pregnant?" And I was like, "No, everybody asked me that." She goes, I just was wondering, right?" So, of course, so I take the job. Now, again, every month, this is going into my fourth month. I'm taking pregnancy tests. They're coming out negative. I'm thinking, I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm not pregnant. So I finally decided to go and see a doctor, see an OBGYN. And at the time I was living in Washington, D.C. and Alexandria. So by the time I got to the doctor, I was like 15, 20 minutes late for my appointment. The lady said, "Well, you're late and we really can't see you." And I just broke down and started crying. I was like, "Ma'am, I came all this way. I mean, something's wrong. Somebody got to tell me something." I'm just boohooing. So she asked me to sit down. I sat down. she said the doctor said he'll see you. He took me in the back, and immediately the doctor says to me, "Let me tell you why you're so upset." I said, "Yeah." And in the early stages of pregnancy, um, yeah, I know, Matima. So in the early stages of pregnancy, or take the up inside of you to see, because it's so small, see inside of your uterus. But I was so far gone, he just put it on the outside, and you could hear the baby's heartbeat. And he was like, "You hear that?" He said, "You're having a baby." So of course I'm like, "Oh my God, what?" Like, and he was like, "Yeah, and you look like
No,
you're
I
like
know the
20
heck I'm not. Yeah.
He was like, "And you're like 20 weeks or so." The funny part of this is, and this has happened to me now twice in my life. My husband, as you know, was a truck driver. And well, that was another reason why I was thinking we'd never have babies, because our schedules, like he left 3 o'clock in the morning and he was in bed when I got home at night. And, you can't make no babies if you're never together. So that was a whole nother thing. So when we finally did get the baby, the doctor had just said, "Well, y'all gotta Dr. Carney said, you gotta take some time and spend some time together if y'all want to have a baby." But I didn't want to have a baby, but I guess my husband did. So anyway, which happened to me the second time too, but we won't go into that. These men. So long story short, I realized I was having him, and then I just started my life as pregnant. And I think once I accepted it, I feel like I just blew up. And I might have already been big to other people, but to me it just really seemed obvious after that. So I was going into my 6th month when I had the miscarriage. As you know, we are people of faith. And I remember very vividly the Friday night that I got the tear in my bag. I went to church at our parents' church. I went to the bathroom and I felt like I had kind of peed on. And one of our sisters, Diane Brooks, was a nurse. And I told her what happened. She goes, "Oh, well, sometimes you will leak fluid." She says, "Just watch that." But everybody was leaving, and I felt the spirit say, "Pray." And I'm like, I'm ready to go home. Like, I'm tired. I want to go home. But when I went down to pray, all I remember saying was, "Thank you for your peace. Thank you for your peace." Because I'm thinking, I don't know what to be saying, because I didn't really have no specific thing to pray. But in hindsight, I believe that was my saving grace, because it was very hard. One of my hardest experiences with it was leaving the hospital without my son. Um, I remember walking out of the hospital, and as I'm walking out, a young lady is walking in, and she's got 4 kids, and they're like stair step, and she's cussing at them, and she's fussing at them. Excuse me, like she didn't even. I mean, she was like, I'm looking at. I'm thinking, now she got 4. She had like she don't even one, and I couldn't take my one home with me, and it was very hard. Um, the other part that was hard was we had started doing the whole buying the clothes thing, and I was moving to Florida with my husband, and so the day that this all happened, back from the hospital, the week after I wouldn't go in the room where all of the clothes and the baby stuff was. And my mother, I sat in the living room floor of her house, and you remember when you walk in the living room is to the left. I sat in the floor with me all night long. because I said, I can't go in there. I just can't. And she said, okay. And she sat with me that whole night while I processed my hurt, my anger. Now that I'm a therapist, I realize that grief, the cycle of grief, has anger in it, and it's okay. It has depression in it, and it's okay. It has denial in it, and it's okay. It has all of those things. And I tell people as a grief counselor, but there is the final step of acceptance. Now, it took me a minute to be okay in that stage because, to Matima's point, when you do the guilt of what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? Why did this happen? Like, what was I stressing? Did I do too much exercise? You start with all the things that you possibly could have done. And the answer is you don't have to do anything. That you don't have to necessarily do anything to experience a stillbirth. So after, and so I let me just say I do a therapy.
Okay, let me say something. Can
You're
you
breaking up. I'm so
hear
sorry.
me?
No, you're frozen. Is that me,
I
Jamie?
lost her.
Okay, I can hear you now, but you're still okay. You
Okay,
just pop. Yep, now you pop back.
three things. The connection is really bad. I don't know if it's
Hmm.
on my end or your end, but like 50% of what you're saying, we're
It's
not
probably on my end.
not hearing. So the connection is really bad. So we might have to do this again, like straight live on Facebook, um, instead of going through Restream.
Okay.
The second thing is you're one of those guests that I like having because I don't have to ask questions. Because literally everything I have written down to ask, you're already telling us. So that makes my job easy. Three, I keep hearing you referring to Mutima, but I don't see any comments from Mutima. So I don't know if that has something to do with my connection or whatever. But I think we're going to go ahead and keep talking and try to finish, keep going where we're going. If the connection gets too bad, we will just come back live straight on Facebook and pick up where we leave off. But I think what you're saying is extremely
Okay.
important, um, because there is one thing I did want to ask, but you mentioned it. I talk to women who are women of faith, who are Christians, who are believers or whatever. And when something like this happens, it challenges their faith. There's some that will pretend that it doesn't because we've been programmed to pretend nothing bothers us. But there are those who will be honest and say, I'm really angry at God because why did this happen to me? Especially those who really want children. What was your response spiritually to this experience?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely shut down. Like, yeah, it was not only spiritually, but naturally. I remember, and I felt bad about it, but I remember my husband, my son, I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want to be comforted. I didn't want I mean, they would touch me and I literally would almost cringe. And spiritually, I felt that, I had my oldest son, right, as a teenager. So I'm thinking, so I had this baby out of wedlock, doing out here, not knowing what I was doing, getting caught up in a situation. And yet now I'm in a situation where I'm married, living for the Lord. I'm trying to do the best I can. And then this is how you do me? Like that's how we doing? And so I was like, okay, well, okay, then me and you not cool, right? Cool. And it was about a year and a half. I remember this part so saying, I'm not going, like, in our faith we call backsliding, where we just give up on God. And I would never do that, but I didn't actively participate. So I would come and I would, do my due diligence of showing up, but my heart was not fully in it anymore, because I felt that God gave me, situation. Um, but what happened, and biggest part of my healing, was one day, our for called me. She called me up, and, she asked me pray with the girl. And I'm praying for other people right now. I got my own stuff. But I was feeling her, right? Hold on one second. I'm gonna see if I use my hotspot rather than my. I don't know if my connection. I don't know if the bad connection has to do with my connection. So I'm just gonna try to connect to see if that's helpful. But I was saying that I I felt like I didn't really want to pray for any.
All right. Kelly, can you hear me at all?